Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Fallout Season 1, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with Coop's story, and then we're going to transition to Lucy's, because obviously their stories are tied together, but we had that opening with Cooper where he was filming a movie, and it is the thing of he doesn't want to kill the bad guy. He even stops asking the director, like, oh, like, do I really have to do it? It's like, can't I just arrest him like I normally did? Which I think is supposed to be that like sad story, and because especially how they had the recap at the beginning of the episode has Wilzig, which I think I kept calling him Wilzog last episode. Wilzig kept being like, oh, like, you know, what kind of animal are you going to become if you learn how to survive? And you see that with Cooper. Like, he was someplace like, hey, I'm a sheriff, I'm a detective, I'm a deputy or whatever. Like, I'm going to capture the bad guy. I'm not going to kill them. And lo and behold, what does he do now? Like, it's just the aspect of how much do you lose along the way, like, of, you know, especially because it's like, right, this is post, before becoming a ghoul, or maybe around the time coming to ghoul. We don't know that side of his story yet, but losing his daughter and losing his wife, what those circumstances did, how they shaped him, how they transformed him, and just over the years you lose more and more of your soul, more and more of your humanity, until he became what he is. So I think it plays into that progression of just like realizing the man he was. Even though it was a movie, he's like, yeah, but this isn't who I am. Like, do I have to really kill the guy? Like, my character would save this guy and just arrest him. Then they find out, like, oh, well, let's talk to so-and-so. It's like, oh, he got fired. What? He had a studio fired because he was a comic. Oh, that's such a bummer. He was such a great writer. It's like, yeah, terrible situation. But it's kind of like, yeah, you have to go in there and shoot the guy. And you see him as the family man. The whole, like, bit between him and his wife, Barbara, about the whole lavender situation, which was, you know, really adorable, you know? And just seeing him, but this tying into the end of the episode, knowing that what is essentially maybe I never noticed it, because I noticed it this time during the credits. I don't know if maybe they changed it a little bit just for this credits, but if you look at the end of the credits, I'm jumping ahead of myself. The job that Cooper gets next is he has to do a commercial. It's a commercial for Vault Tech. He has to wear their suit, and he's even asking, like, oh, will this really protect from radiation? They look at each other, yeah. Sure, it's like the two people from Vault, which I don't know what it's like. They were saying Barbara hooked that up, so that's why I was like, oh, was she part of Vault Tech? But they say, like, she had to pull some strings to kind of make that happen, which I'm wondering, like, what's the correlation and connection to, like, why would Barbara do that? I guess, like, maybe they're going to pay a lot of money for Cooper to do it, but he don't know, because the only reason, he's like, I never do advertisements. He's like, the only reason I'm doing this is because Barbara asked me to. But I'm like, why did she ask him to do it? Was it, like I said, was like a lot of money being offered, or does she have, like, is she, because we don't know what she does for a living, so I'm like, was she part of Vault Tech? Or, like, because they said, like, she kind of had asked several people, so she could still be part of Vault Tech, but maybe she had to work her way up the chain to get this to be, like, signed off on. I don't know, that's unclear, but yeah, he's modeling for it, and we find out the whole thumb thing that he introduced to his daughter in, like, episode 1 about, like, you know, an atomic explosion and stuff like that, that the mascot for Fallout, but it's also like the mascot for Vault Tech, doing the thumbs up, is because during the photo shoot he came up with that. So it's probably a real thing he applied to that, and now it's like it has that sad connotation behind, like, oh yeah, that thumbs up and what it represents. Hence why at the end of the episode, like, when they came across that Vault Tech, like, advertisement sign, he blew a hole in its face, because it's like, it's a reminder of, well, it's like basically screw Vault Tech and everything that they were about, because it was some bullshit. Because, hey, that guy, like, the party he was at, that guy wouldn't let people in. It's just, you know, only the rich were saved. Like, if you were just some schmuck, you know, Cooper might have been famous, but he wasn't rich and powerful enough, and probably didn't know the right people to have, like, a vault situation set up to protect. I mean, we don't know how the bunker situation worked out for other people, like that party, like that family that went to the bunkers. We don't know how things worked out for them. Maybe that was like a vault situation, not just a regular bunker. Maybe not. Unclear. But it's also a representation of who he was in the past, and just because even Lucy was like, radiation is like, is that what happened to you? And he was like, yes, something like that, which I'm like, yeah, what thought was interesting. Like, so it's not clear cut how he ended up as the ghoul. So it wasn't just a pure radiation thing. There seems like probably a lot more tragedy behind that story. It's already tragic enough already on the surface of what we know, but it's probably going to get 1,000 times more tragic once you learn the truth of it. Typically these stories end up being that case. Like a great example I'll use, like Blue Eye Samurai, Mizu's backstory. Like it's like, oh man, that sucks and it's tragic. And you get partway through the show, you're like, oh no, it's even more jacked up than you thought it was. Even more tragic, it's even more sad. But either way, tangents and all that aside. But now you can also see why he probably looks at someone like Lucy a Vaulty and like hates him, or like why he tries. I mean, he has his reasons because he's already rough around the edges. How he treats Lucy, he treat anybody that same way because that's just who he is. But you could probably also say there's like a little extra venom anytime he looks at Lucy just because of who she is and what she represents, because she doesn't really know the history of the Vaults. Like once again, because she looks at them as like, oh, we're the good guys, we're gonna save this savage world. It's like, yeah, you people weren't like the Vault Tech and all that weren't great people. So once again, it's all about Lucy's perception of she's so like wide-eyed and doe-eyed and so optimistic and thinking like, oh, we're gonna change the world, not knowing the reality of things. Like she lived her life in the bubble and doesn't have, now she's stepping outside that bubble, kind of seeing the world for what it really is, seeing her life for what it is. And I talked about that obviously last episode, some of the conversation between her and was it Mama June was the lady's name who told her to get Wilzig to Daver. So either way, him and going back the present day, him and CX404 are chasing after Lucy and Wilzig's head, which Lucy ultimately ended up. Luckily, she picked the right time to do it, put the tracker inside of him, but he gets gobbled up by was it called a gulper, which that thing is extra disgusting because I had to go back and rewind. I was like, is the inside of its mouth those little like those things in its mouth? I'm like, are those fucking fingers? They look like fingers. And I was like, that's fucking disgusting. It's like that thing kind of like, it looks like a more realistic jacked up Pokemon. There's a Pokemon that kind of looks like that. I'm not well versed enough in Pokemon to even hazard a guess of what the Pokemon is, but there's a certain Pokemon I'm like, kind of looks like that, but it's like a more like horror, like mutated abomination, like realistic version of like some Pokemon. But it's like, oh, that thing was disgusting. But sadly for Lucy, Cooper caught up to her, and I love that whole situation of like, she's like, oh, you can't torture me. That's not good. Like, it doesn't give you any information. He's like, people did this whole thing called studies, and he goes on and on about it, and about like, right, torture didn't work. But he does bring up, which is something kind of interesting, like all these studies say torture doesn't work. But the fact of the matter is, despite that, it continued for years and years and years. Despite all these studies saying like it doesn't work, it still ended up continuing for so long. And it's like, she's even asking, like, then what's the point of you torturing me? He's like, oh, this isn't torture. I'm using you as bait. During that whole situation, I mean, it's kind of nice that, like, everyone took part in it, especially CX404 kind of, like, biting it and kind of, like, getting it to back away. The thing is I don't know if CX404 could smell Wilzig's head inside of it or whatever, but it's like, oh, like, it probably did it. Well, I'd assume like it must smell him on some level, because I'm like, would you do that for Cooper or would you do that for Lucy? Or is it just like the natural instinct of, well, I mean, we know this thing goes after creatures anyway, because like it killed that like roach last episode. Even at one point when one of the bugs that was on Lucy from being dumped into the water, Cooper fed it. So it's like, it should be a natural instinct of like, oh, you're an enemy, I'm just going to attack you. It's not even about Cooper or Lucy or Wilzig. It's just like, nah, I mean, to be fair, it's probably bred that way to be an attack dog. Once again, we don't know what the fully purpose of that was. They were meant to be well-trained, mutated dogs. I think maybe those dogs are mutants too. We haven't really gotten into that. It looks like a pretty normal dog, but nah. Because the whole, once again, incinerate them if they are less than 10 pounds and stuff. So, but either way, I thought it was interesting when Lucy ended up hitting the thing with her bag. I was like, oh, you're about to feed your own bag to that thing? But it didn't even click in my head. I'm like, I felt so stupid later because oh, that's not Lucy's bag. That's the ghoul's bag. Because it turns out it had what appears to be some kind of medication or something that the ghoul needs. Because I wonder, is that the same stuff that was being put in his grave? I guess it's what keeps him going. Like, even in his, like, resting state and kind of like his stasis that he gets put in when he's in the ground and stuff. I thought that stuff there kept him in stasis. It's like, no, it's meant to keep him alive. I don't know. Maybe it's like a thing of without it, he goes. Maybe it's kind of like iZombie. Zombies don't eat any brains; they go feral. Maybe it's something similar to that, or it could just be like, no, it just naturally keeps him alive, and he only had like 3 or so left in total. He used one in an episode, but I can't remember. He had like 2 or 3 left. But yeah, they all got smashed up. So, and Lucy's talking about like the golden rule of do unto others what you want done to you. And it's just like, once again, it's like you keep forgetting where you are. You know, this ain't the vault. Like, we don't believe in that BS. It's do or die up here, kill or be killed. But Lucy's so ingrained in her ideas of like, right. She thinks like also pleading with the ghoul of like, right, like, oh, my dad, like, just give me the head, like, I need to get the head back and I'll help my dad, and then you could get whatever you want, but it's like, the thing is, you don't know the ghoul's motivation. Well, his motivation is getting paid, but also it's like, you don't know other people enough. I mean, hey, it's sweet, that you want to believe the best in people, but it's also super naive to think like, oh, people are going to give a shit about your circumstances. Like, oh, you want to save your dad? I don't give a shit. That's not my problem, But maybe being around Lucy, once again, we don't know how these characters will affect each other. Like, what kind of effect Lucy or Cooper or Maximus might have on each other or other characters in the story. So that's going to be something interesting to see. Like, if being around Lucy will have any effect, will it kind of start making that dead ghoul heart of his beat once again? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, now that he had no medication left, he has to like bail, and he ends up taking Lucy with him. Leaves the dog behind. I thought the dog was going to be his old compatriot, but it's like, I mean, could always circle back around and come back for the dog later. Because he's like, yeah, we'll come back for the head, because obviously that thing digests very slowly, so the head isn't going forever. So for now, he's taking Lucy, and I'm assuming he's going to go somewhere to pick up some medication. He even told her, like, yeah, there's kind of another golden rule of the wastelands, and it's kind of like, basically, shit never goes your way. Like, there's always going to be something that gets in your goddamn way every time. It's kind of like his, is me paraphrasing the whole situation. So, interesting developments on that front. Circling over to the Maximus side of things, obviously he's in the process of trying to repair the suit, but I'm like, I mean, you've been around the Brotherhood of Steel enough to know probably what you needed to repair, so I thought that was interesting. I mean, obviously you don't know the ins and outs, because obviously you didn't, like, figure out the ghouls. You lost against the ghoul because you didn't really know how to fully operate everything. But I'm wondering some of those mistakes he made, like, would any other knight have made that mistake? Would Titus have? I mean, it didn't seem like he was the greatest knight either, but, Either way, I love that whole bit where he's, like, getting the piece repaired, and he has to sell some of his teeth to repair it, which I'm like, first and foremost, that's so interesting. But also, like, at first I was like, you're stupid. Why would you literally leave a knight armor out and about for, like, oh, you're like, oh, let me, the only thing holding it here is chains that are holding him. Like, that's stupid. Like, someone's going to come and jack that. I literally expected someone to have stolen his armor by the time he got back. They were in the process of stealing it, but I thought they already took off with it. But it's like, no, they didn't. But my bit, I love that whole bit of like, oh, him getting enough bottle caps, and she immediately fixes the thing. She literally works on it for a second. She like touches it with her tool, and it's like, yeah, it's done. It's like, he's like, really? You couldn't do that for 4 bottle caps? I had to get 5 and then give you extra for doing it extra fast, even though it took you literally seconds. It's like, that was your fault for being like, but I mean, it's like, you didn't know how long it was going to take. It's just like, yeah, that's just kind of the world spitting in your face. But he had gotten in contact with the Brotherhood, because they were reaching out to him, because it's like, hey, you haven't contacted us. You're supposed to schedule contact us. And he didn't. And I love that he tried to put on his voice and try to pretend to be Titus, but they're like, cool, we're going to send over a new squire, because I'm like, why'd you even come up with that lie? I guess... Because I guess, I don't know. That was actually stupid on his part. Like, why would you say that, you, Maximus, are dead? Like, what purpose would that have done? But I guess it's like, maybe he thought they kind of understand, like, oh, he's going it alone, so maybe we should leave him alone and let him kind of focus. It's going to take longer because he's going alone. It's like, but all you did was put yourself in position of, hey, let's send you over a squire, and lo and behold, who is the squire? None other than Thaddeus, which makes a lot of sense. I was like, how are you going to work your way around this? And he just had to get into suit. Once again, the voice is distorted, so it benefits him a lot. And I love that, what that does, because it's like, hey, here's the guy, one of the guys who made your life a living hell, and now it's like, oh, Maximus, who was so beat down up on, felt so weak in multiple ways. The whole Thaddeus thing, and how they treated him back at the base, but also like Titus kind of calling him worthless and stuff. And, now it's like he was able to take back a lot of power by just like sitting there and watching Titus die. And now he gets to punk Thaddeus around, because again, this is payback for everything you put me through. So kind of treating him like shit, having him climb up a tree that would serve no purpose. He's like, yeah, get me an apple out of the tree. And he was feeling good about it. He was power tripping a little bit. Understandable. You've been beat down. Like, of course, that's going to be ingrained in you a little bit. Like, right, I want some payback. But, like, he accidentally let I was about to say he accidentally let the ghoul get away. It's like, nope, he didn't. The ghoul basically outsmarted you and outmaneuvered you, but he was trying to pretend like, no, I let the ghoul go. And Thaddeus like, oh yeah, because you knew that we'd be able to track him. And it's like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I totally did that 100% on purpose. So I even love the bit where they found Wilzig's body, and it's like, oh, is this the guy's? It's hard to tell. And then like Thaddeus walks over, puts the drawing, the sketch next to the body and where the head should be. It's like, yeah, that should be the guy. I'm like, what the fuck does that even mean? Shut up. I was like, I love that stupid bit. I love it. But there was also kind of this neat moment between Thaddeus and Maximus, where it's like, oh, like, how did Maximus die? It's like, yeah, I kind of felt bad for him. It's like, no, he was a good guy. It's like, oh, cool. Well, say something bad about him. And it's like, well, I don't really want to. He's dead. It's like, do it, Squire. And he's like, well, that guy, me and the others beat him up. And we find out it's like, it's the typical bullying thing that typically a bully is a bully because, one, either they themselves were bullied, and it's like, oh, cool, I get to make someone else's life miserable, so my life isn't miserable. There's that, which ends up being Thaddeus' case. There's, like, obviously, there's always extenuating circumstances why a bully becomes a bully, and that turns out to be Thaddeus's. He was the runt that got beat up on, and then the one moment someone else, like a new slew of recruits came, Maximus just happened to be unlucky. It's like, oh, let's beat up on him. And he's like, yeah, I became popular and I stopped getting beat up on. He was like, I was hoping that Maximus would live long enough that he can find someone to beat up too. And it's just like, the sad thing is that was Thaddeus's perspective on it of, yeah, he didn't live long enough. Like, he died being like the punching bag. But it's like, if he lived longer, he could have found someone else to beat up. And it's like, not thinking like, maybe we could have broken the cycle. It's like, no, let's just keep this cycle of bullying someone just to make ourselves seem better and more popular, So that was actually kind of sad. But I think hearing that made Maximus kind of see Thaddeus in a different light, where it's like, oh, so you were me. Like, you're just, it doesn't make it better, but it makes it understandable of, oh yeah, you treated me like shit because you were treated like shit. It's just, which is so ironic considering that's what you're doing to him. So you're getting payback at, it's a whole vicious, even with them alone, it became a vicious cycle. I mean, arguably, I didn't even think about that while I was saying all that. It's like, to be fair, Maximus did find someone to kind of punk on, beat up on a little bit. I mean, it's not one-to-one, but it's still that same thing of like having power over someone. He has that now, probably pretending to be Titus and, having power over Thaddeus. But yeah, they ended up tracking the ghoul and Lucy to the Gulper. I should also note, and I think this is going to be just an interesting little bit of dialogue where it's like when they were like came across Wilzig's body, it's like, oh, who do you think did this, the girl or the ghoul? And immediately it's like, no, the ghoul obviously did it, which is such interesting because Maximus sees like Lucy as like, oh my gosh, she was some sweet. I mean, it's so interesting because it seems like what that storyline is going to be set up for Lucy and Maximus of like, oh, I mean, once again, the journey is going to change both of them, but it's like, will they even be able to recognize themselves when it's all said and done? But it's like, yeah, he has this idea of like, right, she's this, like, there's no way she would do that, which she did. And her mind is like, oh my God, that knight was so cool, knight in shining armor, and go along with like her idealism of like how life should be and how people should be. So it's going to be maybe kind of a not rude awakening, but maybe they're not going to be the people they expect when they finally do meet up again, just face to face, as not just in the knight suit armor, but Maximus and Lucy. So that's going to be interesting. But either way, they went toe to toe with the Gulper. Luckily, well, it's kind of a repeat of episode 2 where it was actually Thaddeus being like, okay, I'll go out there first, because it seems like that's what the squires are meant to be. They're meant to be the sacrificial lambs. It seems like most squires just know that, because Thaddeus is like, no, let me go out there. But it's like, no, you stay back. It's like, right, he knows what it's like to be in that situation, thrown to the wolves to be eaten. And it's like, well, he feels bad about Thaddeus and kind of is like, right, you're not as bad as I thought you were. So it's like, okay, I don't want you to die, so like get back there, I'll hold this off. So for one, showing more bravery than and more nobilism than Titus, because it seems like other knights as well would probably just throw their squires into the fire and just be sacrificial lambs. But despite that, like, Thaddeus did help fire a weapon at it, but obviously didn't do anything. So he ends up getting grabbed up. The thing's trying to gobble him up. I was like, is he about to actually die despite all this? But it's like, nope. Luckily, Maximus got to him, was pulling on him, and this thing's about to swallow him. And then I guess, I don't know whether it's just because of the position that he was in, but something, I guess maybe something on him like activated and like its gag reflex, and it threw up and I guess died from it because it threw up its orb. I don't know what happened, but it's like the little fingers inside of its mouth started touching Thaddeus's legs and ended up like spewing, like just throwing its own guts out to extent, because it looked like the inside of it just like flew out. It was just like, ugh. It's like someone literally reached in and turned its insides out. It's like, ugh. And luckily it threw up the head, which everyone's like, yeah. So they're so excited about that. Like, it's kind of neat seeing them kind of be like idiots together. And it's like, oh, the sad thing is, if Thaddeus finds out about who that Maximus is alive and Titus is dead and Maximus has been pretending to be, like, despite them being on good terms now, it's like, oh my God, you saved me as well. You saved me first. It's like, they're on really good terms now. But the moment the truth comes out, it's probably going to be a thing of, sadly, Thaddeus is probably going to turn on Maximus, and Maximus will most likely have to kill him just to keep his mouth shut, to keep his secret. And that's probably going to be the tragedy that kind of ends up happening there. Just haven't seen anything ahead of time. I'm just kind of guessing, because it's just the Brotherhood of Steel, they indoctrinate you to believe a certain thing, and Maximus is kind of going his own route in some regards, but I could definitely see, despite being kind of a softie, I mean, that might also play into it too, like, right, the differences between the squires and the knights is like, the knights are just jaded and just power tripping assholes, and the squires are just the people that are kind of pumped up, but it's like, once again, this is all about adapting. In general, the world is about adapting and, finding your place and who will you be when it's all said and done. Once again, each one of our main characters is, some are going through the process of that. Some, like Cooper, have already gone through the process of changing and becoming something else. So that's some interesting developments. Because they do now have the head. Now the question is, like, well, if you report this, they will come track you down. And it's like, how long will you be able to keep up this front that you're Titus before you're found out? And this could still tie into, potentially, like I said, of Thaddeus like turning on Maximus, but we'll see. And then finally we have we cut back to Vault 33, where in the aftermath of Chet and Norm helping Lucy leave, Chet ends up getting punished, and now he's no longer on gate opening duty. But for him, it's like, who am I without that? He's trying to pretend like, oh, he's okay, but he's a mess. But it's like, yeah, like I'm sure it's been his job for so long, and maybe we have no idea where that stands on the promotion scale. Like, did he have to work a long time to get there? Has it been his entire job for a while? Like, we don't know, but it seemed like he's done it long enough where he feels like he has no purpose outside of that. It's like, who am I without this position? And then when it came to everyone trying to punish Norm for what he did, it's like, what are you going to do? Apparently every job he's ever worked here he's, quote, lacked enthusiasm. So they're trying to decide how they punish someone like that. Like, oh, no job you're going to give me is going to really be any punishment. But then, like, the one of the trio that's kind of running things, I guess not all three of them are overseers, only the two dudes are, but the lady's like, oh, we found something for you, because it was about the prisoners, because, like, Norman made this point of, oh, I'm glad to know we're punishing vault dwellers. Does that mean, equal punishment for those who murder vault dwellers? I thought the whole setup was going to be like, oh, when he's bringing them food later, I was like, oh, they gave him a job, it's to kill, and I thought that was like what that initial setup was, like, oh, you're going to kill all those raiders by poisoning their food. But it's like, no, they seem fine. And then later on, when that all talking, I was like, oh, that was never the plan. His punishment was just like, right, we're going to relegate you to feeding the prisoners, which is extra effed up, considering it's like, once again, it's like your feet, it becomes that thing of, well, they're bad people, but they're in prison, but should you be wasting food and resources on keeping them alive? Because these people would do this if given the opportunity right now. They'd still try and kill us. So it's like, but it's also like, that's what, it's like, despite what you've done, like, there's a due process. I mean, it doesn't seem like, what is due process in this world? There kind of is none. It's lawlessness. But it's like, here are the vault dwellers who are the arbiters of all things good and civilized and handling things the right way. They're trying to decide, well, what do we do? The plan is, hey, let's feed them, but also rehabilitate them. It's like, oh, we can teach them Shakespeare, we can teach them morals, yada yada yada. So I could teach them calculus. And you have Norm being like, or we can kill them like they were going to do to us. But it's kind of like, no, we can't do that, yada yada yada. But it's like, and the moment, like, we got reintroduced to Norm this episode, was like, oh, like, even before we even got to that, like, the look on Norm's face, I'm like, is Norm about to enter his villain arc in this series? It feels like it. It seems like Norm's probably going to, like, be a usurper that ends up kind of, I mean, he is the son of the overseer, so it's like, he's kind of been very meekish, but it could be like this darkness has been brewing in him. Spoilers. If I'm not mistaken, and once again, this is one of the few Fallout things I know, and this might be a massive spoiler. It's obviously each game is kind of its own thing, but if I remember correctly, isn't one of the villains of one of the Fallout games the main character's child? Like, I want to say, once again, sorry, I don't have the context for it, but I'm like, isn't that the twist for, like, ain't it Fallout 4? That the twist, maybe it's, I don't think it's 76. I think it's Fallout 4, isn't it? That the main antagonist ends up being the main character's child or some shit like that. I want to say that ends up being the case. This kind of gives me that same vibe, where it's just kind of like, maybe this has always been ingrained in Norm, or just, but maybe it's also supposed to be kind of that nature versus nurture conversation of maybe, I mean, because Lucy believes in all this. She always has. And even before all this, it seems like Norm didn't. Like, once again, he lacked enthusiasm where Lucy did. So it's like, right, she's kind of like the representative of, like, yeah, she believes in all of this, whereas, like, Norm doesn't. And just, like, they're very different outlooks on things. So Lucy's friend kind of gives him the go ahead of, like, yeah, you should kill those people. Your dad, he would do the right thing. She's kind of implying, like, yeah, you should kill those people because, rehabilitating them into our society. It's like, no, that's not a good idea. That's actually stupid. So she kind of gave him the go ahead. To be fair, she's amply motivated because her husband wasn't one of the people killed by them. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where things go on that front. We did also get some information. Obviously, it's like the trifecta of Vaults 31, 32, and 33. 32 was taken out, but 31 wasn't. That ended up being their issue of Norm being like, yeah, you could have put us all in danger. Like, oh, why do you think what happened in Vault 32 happens? Like, well, someone was idiotic and opened the doorway to to the surface and stuff. And I'm like, well, you didn't see Vault 32 betraying you and finding out they were raiders. How do you actually know Vault 31 isn't the same thing? It's like, yeah, we talked to 31's overseers. Like, he's like, oh, you were fooled once. Who's to say you won't get fooled twice? But it's like, maybe they probably had prior relations with 31, so maybe there have been no issues in the past. This was their first interaction with 32, so maybe that's the difference. I don't know. But either way, it's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.